Hello everyone, I am Pastor Aldrin from JRK Church. Recently I came across a video where someone was arguing that those who use the NIV and ESV translations of the Bible are being misled in their faith, claiming that only the KJV should be used. Now, while I believe the KJV is an important and beautiful translation, I have to be honest, it's not necessarily the most accurate translation of the Bible. This is because the NIV and ESV were translated from older and more reliable manuscripts than those used for the KJV. To better understand why this is the case and what the real differences are between these translations, let's dive deeper into the comparison. Please listen closely to my explanation. Let's start by comparing some verses in the KJV, NIV, and ESV, Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12. KJV, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? NIV, how you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. ESV, how you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. The KJV uses the term Lucifer because it comes from the Latin Vulgate translation, where Lucifer means light bringer. In the original Hebrew, the term used is Hallel, meaning shining one or morning star. This verse is a reference to Satan's fall from heaven, and the term morning star or day star is used to symbolize Satan's once bright but now fallen nature. However, there's confusion here because the term morning star is also used to describe Jesus Christ in another part of the Bible. But Jesus is referred to as the bright morning star in Revelation chapter 22 verse 16, which carries a completely different meaning. Revelation chapter 22 verse 16, KJV/NIV/ESV, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. It's important to note that while morning star is used metaphorically for both Satan and Jesus, they are not the same. Satan is called the morning star in Isaiah 14:12 in a fallen context, representing a lost glory and rebellion against God. Jesus Christ is called the bright morning star in Revelation 22:16 as a symbol of eternal glory, light, and hope. The key difference is the brightness and the context. While Satan's morning star symbolizes a fallen being who lost his place in heaven, Jesus as the bright morning star represents the true light, the one who shines forever in glory. One of the most significant differences between the KJV and modern translations like the NIV and ESV lies in the manuscripts used for the translation. The KJV was translated in 1611 and is based on a manuscript known as the Textus Receptus, which means received text. The Textus Receptus was compiled in the early 16th century by the scholar Erasmus. At the time, Erasmus had access to only a handful of late Greek manuscripts that were written in the 12th century, long after the original New Testament was penned. The KJV was built on these later manuscripts, which were incomplete in some areas. For example, Erasmus had to use the Latin Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible, to fill in missing sections, such as the last 6 verses of Revelation, which were absent in the Greek manuscripts he had. However, in the centuries that followed the translation of the KJV, older and more reliable manuscripts were discovered. These include the Codex Sinaiticus, discovered in the 19th century, which dates to the 4th century AD, and the Codex Vaticanus, also from the 4th century, housed in the Vatican Library. These manuscripts are part of what is known as the Alexandrian family of texts. They are much older and closer to the original writings of the New Testament. Because these manuscripts were written closer to the time of the apostles, they are considered to be more accurate since they underwent fewer changes or copyist errors over time. The NIV and ESV are based on these older manuscripts, and as a result, they are considered to be more reliable translations of the original text. Scholars believe that the older the manuscript, the fewer alterations and copying errors it has gone through. This is why the NIV and ESV sometimes omit words or phrases that appear in the KJV. Those phrases were likely added later in the transmission process as scribes copied the text over the centuries. Micah chapter 5 verse 2 KJV, But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, Niv, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, ESV, But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. Here, the differences are minor. The KJV uses older English words like thou, while the NIV and ESV use the more modern you. Both versions communicate the same essential meaning. Luke chapter 2 verse 33. KJV, and Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken of him. NIV, the child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. ESV, and his father and mother marveled at what was said about him. In the KJV, the phrase Joseph and his mother is used, which may have been done to emphasize Jesus' virgin birth. Meanwhile, the NIV and ESV use the phrase father and mother to reflect Joseph's legal role as Jesus' father. In several passages, the KJV translates the Greek word proskuneo as worship, while modern translations like the NIV and ESV often translate it as knelt or bowed down. Matthew chapter 8 verse 2. The King James Version says, "And behold, there came a leper and worshipped him," while the New International Version and the English Standard Version say, "A man with leprosy came and knelt before him." In this instance, the King James Version uses the word worshipped, where the modern translations choose knelt. In the context of these passages, kneeling or bowing down is considered an act of worship. This is why, in Revelation chapter 22 verses 8 to 9, the angel tells John not to kneel before him, saying, "Do not do that, worship God." The angel is clear that kneeling is a sign of worship, which should only be directed to God. Kneeling before the angel would have been an act of worship that was inappropriate because only God deserves worship. This shows that kneeling is indeed considered an act of worship when used in the biblical context. For example, in Colossians chapter 1 verse 14, KJV, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. NIV, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. The phrase "through his blood" is found in the KJV but is omitted in the NIV and ESV because it doesn't appear in the oldest manuscripts. This phrase was likely added later for emphasis in later copies of the text. However, the idea that redemption comes through Christ's blood is still clear throughout the Bible, such as in Ephesians chapter 1 verse 7, so this omission doesn't change the doctrine. So, is the KJV the most accurate Bible translation? While the KJV is a highly respected and historically significant translation, it is not necessarily the most accurate by modern standards. There are a few cases where the KJV includes words or phrases that were not part of the original manuscripts. One notable example is found in 1 John chapter 5 verse 7, where the KJV contains a Trinitarian phrase that doesn't appear in the oldest Greek manuscripts. This phrase is omitted in the NIV and ESV because it was likely added later in the transmission of the text. The NIV and ESV reflect modern scholarship and are based on more recent and reliable manuscript discoveries, making them more accurate to the original languages of the Bible. In conclusion, while the KJV is a beautiful and historic translation, it's not the only Bible translation that Christians should rely on. Modern translations like the NIV and ESV are based on older and more reliable manuscripts, providing us with a closer representation of the original texts. The use of the word Lucifer in the KJV is just one example of how certain terms in Christian theology have evolved over time, even though they aren't found in the original manuscripts. Additionally, the confusion between morning star and bright morning star is clarified when we understand that Satan is called the morning star to symbolize his fall, while Jesus Christ is called the bright morning star to represent his eternal glory and hope. Before we wrap up, I want to invite you to join our online Bible study at JRK Church. It takes place every Tuesday on Zoom, from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Qatar time, 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Dubai time, and 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Philippines time. If you'd like to learn more about God and study His Word in a welcoming environment, you can participate live on Zoom, or watch the sessions on Facebook. The recorded videos will also be available on YouTube for those who miss it. Feel free to ask questions during the study and engage with others as we grow together in faith. I hope to see you there.